welcome to another edition of Jump Right In. And to my left, I have Katie Moore, and of course, across from myself, I have George Jackman. Now, Katie has been a teacher for many years, still continuing to invigilate exams. Is that correct?
That's true, yes. I help with all the invigilation for the external exams.
Okay,
yes.
so you are a lifelong teacher. You have no intention of giving up the classroom full time.
Well, invigilation is not quite like classroom, you know. It's
True.
a different aspect. But I usually do the special accommodations which need the extra help.
Now tell me, we were talking before the camera started rolling, we started talking about accountability. And we keep hearing this word more and more, as in who is accountable for student achievement? Is it the teachers? Is it the parents? Is it the students themselves? What are your thoughts on that?
The problem I have with this notion of accountability is that it suggests either reward or punishment at the end of it. Now, the problem I have with that is that the ordinary classroom teacher seems to me to be just one cog in a wheel. And very often, he or she does not really have much leeway when it comes to policies that are handed down, when it comes to making certain decisions and so on. Very often, the teacher's voice is not even heard or listened to. So, to start, that is my problem with this whole notion of accountability.
Well, I suppose there is a certain accountability in all three areas, really. I mean, yes, the student is accountable for what the student does. The teacher is accountable for helping that student along to achieve something. But the parent is also accountable in getting the child ready for school, fed, appropriate equipment if necessary, and I think the parent has far more input, or should have far more input than they realize.
Then, of course, too, there's the administration, and of course, there is the political director, especially in all countries.
They're very
very,
much
very
imposed on
important.
politicians. At least when I was teaching at the high school, they were.
Well, again, that depends on the jurisdiction, or in the Caribbean, on the country, the island. And even when those who are in administration, whether at the individual school level or at the departmental or governmental level, even when they are educators themselves, sometimes you get the impression that they forget
They're
what
side
it is
of it,
like.
don't they?
Yes. And what makes it worse is if you have the Minister of Education, the politician himself, who wasn't educated, because then he has his own set of ideas that he tries to push within his lifetime as minister, and that can make things a bit more complicated as well.
So overall, this whole issue of accountability, there's so many factors. Like you're saying, it's a cog, and you mentioned that all these different factors are playing into it. So it is very, very difficult to point a finger and say, well, this person is accountable for that, or that the accountability rests solely with this group of individuals. And it was very interesting to hear you say the idea of rewards and punishment, or rewards and consequences. Doesn't that then tie in with performance management?
Well, look, the whole thing is that I am supposed to be trained. I am supposed to have a number of individuals in the class or set, and I am supposed to have a syllabus, and I am supposed to get them through to understanding certain skills and certain concepts and certain facts by a certain time. And there's some jurisdictions where it is felt that if I don't, then the fault is mine, and therefore how I am paid or not paid relies on that.
It relies heavily on that. I mean, you were saying earlier that we are fortunate that we haven't reached the stage where salaries are tied
to performance.
or funding for the schools, as a matter of fact,
Yes.
tied to performance.
But surely if the school doesn't perform, it needs more funding than the school that does.
Some would argue yes, some would say close that school down because that school is clearly not operating the way that it's supposed to be operating.
Well, that's true, but in Cayman you couldn't do that, could you?
It's too small.
Too small.
It's too
You
small.
can see that in a country like Britain, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I mean, who's to judge in any case? I often wonder, it's very subjective, even though
Yes.
they're supposed to be, you know, Ofsted, for example, but even with the inspectors that came here,
Yes.
they were very subjective in what they said. And I remember one class in particular, they said how well those children were doing and how you know, what an outstanding class it had been that they had observed.
Yes.
And then they didn't say this to me as a teacher. They went behind me and said, but you know, that particular class isn't doing literature, and it should be because it's good enough to do literature. And they were judging that on one class.
One
And
class, yes.
it was, I mean, I knew if the class was well enough to be doing an external exam in literature, they'd be doing it.
Yes.
But they weren't. They could cope with the language,
Yes.
but they certainly couldn't cope with the literature. And they were judging me
Yeah.
on that,
Yeah.
and they didn't know, I mean, from one lesson, how can you really tell what those children can do?
Yes.
Yeah, but this is the thing about inspections and exercises like that, because there is the assumption, seems to me that the underlying assumption is always that the teacher, I wouldn't want to say at fault always, but that it is somehow that the teacher
Yes.
can do better and can always do better,
Always, and do
irregardless,
more.
and do more,
Yes.
whether or not the administration provides the tools, whether or not the culture of the society is one that allows students to think even in terms of study or in terms of education.
So you mean that in terms of a culture that will validate education and will see
That would-
education as necessary and important?
Yeah, that see education as allowing you to be upwardly mobile, for example, or to get a good job or whatever. It may not be that way at all. You know,
And I don't disagree with the idea of inclusion. I do think all students should be included in whatever, because remember that came up a few years ago. But the whole point is, there are children who are not capable, no matter how well you teach, no matter how long they go to school, even if until they're 30, you know, they would never achieve what the better students can achieve. And I think that they lose sight of that fact when they say, well, get them into more school, give them more hours, get more teachers to it, you know.
Yes.
And it doesn't work. There's a vast range of ability from, you know,
From the higher end right down to
right
the
down
lower
to,
end.
yes, I mean, it's,
Yeah. And I mean, my thing about that is that I believe that teacher training programs, now if you are going to go with inclusion, that teacher training programs should have more emphasis or some more courses that deal with special educational needs. Because it's hard if you have a large spectrum of students to deal with, all these diverse learners, and you don't have the correct or the proper or the necessary training to deal with all of those. And these are the things that you should take into account when you're talking about accountability. You know, in that, have they done, like you said, has the administration provided the teachers with the tools that they need to
I
effectively,
think that is the problem.
to effectively give the students what they need? And I would go so far as, is it realistic to say that every need will be met?
No, it's not realistic.
well, even, okay, we come back to that. But I'm thinking of, because I've been in both situations. You have one extreme where the school has an independent board and even had, in those days, the right to hire and to fire the teacher.
Okay.
That has its pluses and its minuses in terms of accountability. On the other hand, you have a situation where all the schools in the jurisdiction at, say, the primary or the secondary level, they are supposed to be clones of each other.
Okay.
You know, in other words, they follow everything as handed down from the department, and there is very little room in there for flexibility or maneuverability, given the circumstances of the intake at that school and so on.
But some people will say that then it becomes easier to manage all those schools if all those schools follow a certain pattern or a certain format or formula, and it becomes easier then for those who are in management to say, this school is doing this school isn't doing this, and so on and so forth. I don't know if that is lazy management.
And the thing is as well, it's very difficult. I mean, these are children that you're dealing with.
Yes.
And one particular year might be a very good year, whereas another particular year might be the pits. And I mean, it goes from one to the other,
One to
really.
the other,
I'm
yeah.
not saying that
Yeah,
you know.
but I understand.
But I mean, going into this qualification bit, I was primary trained, which was very helpful when I came to work in the secondary here, because you are taught how to teach. Now, a secondary school teacher is often just taught the subject and not really how to teach. I'm talking about from when they're in university and so on,
Well, that makes sense, because at the primary level, at secondary, you're expecting that they're coming to you and they have that foundation.
You're
there
expecting
already.
that, but you can't have that expectation, especially here. I know that sounds pretty rude, but quite frankly, a primary school trained teacher would cope better in a secondary school here than a graduate coming in, and I think that's been a lot of the problem.
It depends on which secondary school, whether here or
Very,
elsewhere.
very interesting.
Because if you have, like in another Caribbean jurisdiction, where at 11 plus, there is still a very competitive examination.
Like an 11 plus.
Yeah.
There is an 11 plus. And rightly or wrongly, the school you get into depends on the result of that examination. So it means then that there's a big difference, academically that is, between schools. Unfortunately too, you can have a situation in the country where only one aspect of student endeavor is really considered. That's in academic.
Yes.
But
That's dangerous too.
yes, because so much activity in today's world depends on culture. Students who are involved in art, music especially, in sports. So much activity, so much professionalism, so much.
And I was just reading recently, actually, they're cutting funding for that aspect. The core subjects do not include music, art, and sports.
Yeah.
That's
And
ridiculous.
and it is absolutely ridiculous.
Especially at the primary school, I would argue that every primary school student should be exposed to music.
Yes, I agree. But then, of
Yeah.
course, I
And,
like music. So.
But you see, I think people.
Maybe then you would like it.
I think people have it separated in their minds, and they don't see the connection or the usefulness of music and art.
But you
and
see,
sport.
it's been proved, if they would look at the research,
Yeah.
that a person who is playing a musical instrument and reading the music at the same time as playing, every aspect of the brain is used. It's not a right hand or a left hand thing.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you have
Want
that as a
that.
core subject?
Very, very true.
Because it would train the whole brain.
But even more so, if you come to a school that takes in all students, whether they speak English or not, whether they are almost ineducable or not, then all the more reason to have possibilities for them to realize somewhat of their potential. But how can you be held accountable when you're in that type of school and the focus is very narrow?
And that is what I was going to say, that your point is that if we really want to have true accountability, then we need to widen. We need to make it so that students are able to shine or able to reach their potential.
area.
And they
In
can't
some
do that
area.
unless they're exposed to
Right,
an
unless they're
entire
exposed to
curriculum.
other things and so on. That's a very, very good point. And so we had a lot of things to talk about or to think about. And this is going to be exciting. I think we're going to have to continue this conversation some more. And we offer you, the viewers, the opportunity to jump right in, teachers, parents, because we haven't even touched accountability from a parental perspective.
No, not really.
No,
No,
no.
no.
Touch that yet. And that might be a touchy subject for some. But we invite you to jump right in. #experience never ages.